Welcome back to PodRocket, a web development podcast brought to you by LogRocket. LogRocket provides AI-first session replay and analytics, which surface the UX and technical issues impacting user experiences. Start understanding where your users are struggling by trying it for free at logrocket.com. Hey, everybody, I am your host today, Paige Niedringhaus, and we are back with our panel episode where we will be talking about the next evolution of web frameworks, what's new with the React Foundation and what that means for developers, and how new visa rules could reshape tech hiring. But before we get into it, let's talk about our panelists. So today we have TJ Van Tol, a principal developer advocate at Blues. TJ is a longtime web developer and a former member of the jQuery, NativeScript, and Kendo UI teams, and is also one of the hosts of the Front End Fire podcast. Welcome to the show, TJ.
Hey, Paige.
We also have Jack Herrington, a blue-collar coder on YouTube and co-host also of the Front End Fire podcast.
It's a Front End Fire reunion right here on LogRocket.
I know. Just got all my friends on the show today. And we are joined by Noel Minchow, a software engineer at LogRocket and longtime other co-host of the LogRocket podcast. Glad to have you here, Noel.
Yeah, happy to be here. This is going to be a spicy one, Paige.
Let's go.
Is.
So how's it feel? Do you remember the Jetsons, Flintstones crossover type episodes? We got that sort of thing going on.
We do. All right. So the first news that we're going to talk about today is Remix v3. It is the new framework that has come out that is making waves, or at least it's making headlines. For people who are unfamiliar, Remix v3 marks a big turning point for the framework. It is the team behind Remix has rebuilt it without React. The philosophy is simple. Modern web standards are finally powerful enough to replace the layers of abstraction that we have built over them. So instead of more frameworks and dependencies, Remix v3 is betting on the platform itself. ES modules, native fetch, service workers, streams, things like that. So the first question that I have for the panelist is, what is your first reaction to Remix? Just kind of walking away from React entirely.
It's not Preact underneath the hood. It's actually their own DIY kind of VDOM framework that they built. And it doesn't have any of the hook-based stuff that we have come to know from React. So there's a new paradigm there that they have that's kind of creating, like you don't really create components, you create component factories, which in turn kind of generate components, kind of like a cross between like a Solid and a React, but it's still got that same component level updating that React does, as opposed to Solid's fine-grained updating, fine-grained reactivity, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, no, there's some interesting differences. Then there's also this whole like controversy around the whole manual updating thing. So they don't have React, it's manual reactivity. So if you change your data, you got to tell the framework. The framework doesn't handle any state or anything like that. Not native.
Yeah, that's good context, Jack. We've got to get around the thing where manual reactivity almost sounds like an oxymoron.
I think it actually is, maybe.
Yeah. The optics here are tricky because, I very much understand, the motivation and mentality here, but I think the community around Remix is, very tumultuous. Everything's, kind of up in the air right now. I don't know, it feels almost a little early to even be talking about this. But again, I understand the motivation here, and I think we'll probably get into this a little deeper, when we're talking about the React Foundation and how much web primitives have come forward. It's tricky to be making changes to this degree when what so many people that aren't super into this headspace and know what Remix is, have these old notions of what's going on. You have to spend an hour just recontextualizing what we're even talking about every time we have one of these discussions.
Throw away the rulebook that you learned. All the idioms with React go away. I know there was this coffee mug that I saw on X just recently, 0 days past when useEffect, messed up and blah, 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 blah. People love to hate useEffect, right? But at the same time, right, I can go grep through a code base and look for useEffect and see where there are issues because these are paradigms. These are known idioms in React. And yet when we've got this new thing, well, now there's QTask, and QTask can be just as deadly in terms of spinning out of control. But now, I don't know, it's kind of like a DIY thing, and there's a whole new set of rules, but the same old problems remain. And so I just try to understand what the point.
I do think that this early, the average person listening to this should probably just ignore this for now, right?
And it's really solid advice, actually.
And that's not any disservice to Remix itself. I mean, it's brand new. I mean, they just showed it off on screen for the first time. And typically in those sort of scenarios, you're fine just waiting until people get their hands on it and try it and vet it out. But it is kind of interesting to follow because these are two guys, Ryan Florence and Michael Jackson, that have been incredibly influential in the last, let's say, decade or so of web development behind React Router and Remix. So it is worth keeping tabs on what they're doing and what they're sort of up to. And just some of the stuff around the release of this are kind of wild. So they did a pretty cool marketing thing where they gave everybody CDs that had the initial version of Remix on it, which is, I don't know, it's silly. It's kind of a silly gimmick, but I thought it was kind of a fun little marketing thing. And then the reveal itself, like if you wanted to check this out, it's a YouTube video where these guys just ad-lib like a 3-hour demo of showing off Remix. And you may think I'm exaggerating that. I am not exaggerating.
You are not, my friend. It is quite the watch.
Which, I mean, there's two ways of looking at that. At once, it's like, man, it would be nice to have the little condensed one, the 5-minute YouTube short, so that I could learn the basics. But if you really do want to learn it, that sometimes seeing creators of it go really in depth on it is a cool way to learn too.
Except that they didn't really go in depth. And that's actually, I ended up in a beef with MJ, one of the creators on X, because when they talked, they did this kind of thing. So they did this Dan Abramov style thing where they're like, okay, I'm going to show you how the framework works by actually building the framework on the fly, right? Which is kind of actually a cool way to do things. Like he showed that with Redux back in the day and worked really well. So they start off with like this kind of very vanilla stuff and an update function. And then they bring in a component creator from Remix.com and they call this.update, which does the rendering. And they kind of just hand wave how that works. But in reality, that's like this whole React subsystem that they created for this, like with the VDOM and the whole thing. And they don't mention that, like, they're just like, oh, it's really simple. It's like, no, it's not really simple, actually. It's got like all kinds of diffing and stuff. It's kind of crazy underneath the hood. It's huge. I mean, I was going into the source on this thing. This thing is huge in terms of, and it's complex, just as complex as React is. Yeah, yeah. And so they spent 3 hours, but they left people with a lot of errant misconceptions about what this thing actually did. I mean, I did find that the router stuff, which was like the second half, was actually a lot more in depth and a lot more kind of well structured.
What's in their wheelhouse?
Yeah, that's true, actually.
Yeah, but this is something that we were talking about even before we started recording today in regards to Remix is one, it should not be named Remix. There is no upgrade path from Remix V2 to V3. It's completely rebuilt from the ground up, like we've just said. It should be named something else. And I don't care what you name it, just name it something different. Don't give people false hope that they can go from 2 to 3 and not have to rebuild their entire code base. And then the second half is just what you were talking about, is this is a 3-hour video. And I don't know about you, but I cannot watch more than like a 3-minute video before I start getting antsy and like clicking on other tabs and looking around. The fact that you don't have some sort of a documentation that also people can just reference after you have shown them like the really cool stuff, so that we don't say the wrong things on Twitter and then get shot down by the creators because we didn't understand what they were trying to tell us on the video, that really bugs me. I like to read docs. I like to read blog posts and announcements and change logs and whatever way more than I want to watch a 3-hour video. I don't have time for that. If you're going to roll out a new framework, give me docs.
Yeah, exactly. Or do kind of what they did like when React first came out. You kind of chew it up in like little 30-minute blocks. It's like, oh, if you want to learn how the rendering cycle works, here's a 30-minute thing on that, or if you don't care about that sort of stuff, here's a 30-minute thing on how to make a component, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So do you think that the direction that they're taking, though, of trying to make it native web APIs and browser first and run anywhere and not depend on React, I guess, is this something that you think other frameworks are going to start doing as well? And does it make it easier for devs to get into it? Or is it just yet another idea for how we can build a JavaScript framework and probably is not going to influence the larger community to go towards it?
That's been Remix's thing. That's kind of the one thing they have kept just similar in V2 and V3 is they've always been, we want to stick with the platform. And I mean, Remix has done okay. They have a niche little following that seems quite content using Remix. The people that use it, we've seen this through things like the JS survey, people that use it do tend to like it. But I argue it's still kind of a niche player. It's still very much in, I don't know, third, fourth-ish place in terms of the JavaScript world. React is still king. And I don't know, we'll see what happens with this if they have a unique twist. it is a kind of a radically different idea, and those ideas sometimes do take off. But the frameworks we've seen sticking more to the web standards, the remixes, or I'd throw all the web component frameworks in the same bucket, they've gained some audience, but they haven't threatened React's dominance of this space.
It feels to me like they've gone from a one-front war against Next.js, which they had before. And so you had the remix folks who were interested in like, oh, I don't want to be on Next.js. I want to do that, but I like React, right? And now they've said, oh, well, we didn't like React, so we're actually going to go and not be Next and not even be React. And now you got this entire own thing that isn't compatible. And they're going to end up in this space of like solid and quick and these kind of frameworks.
Svelte, maybe.
Yeah. Svelte, kind of in that. I would say Svelte is like more at the top of that kind of, whatever. But in that zone of like the frameworks that are just the alternative frameworks that like,
alternatives.
That aren't one of the big ones.
Back to the original question of like, will other frameworks follow suit in this kind of agnosticism, but also like being deployable? Like, that's what feels more different about Remix compared to these other alternative frameworks to me is like, it seems we're in this mode where there's a spectrum of how frameworks are trying to solve this problem of like using the server to render again and the difficulties that brings forth and not being simple. So it's like we have this whole spectrum of like, how heavy-handed are we going to be in this? Because you can get all this really cool stuff off the shelf if you make it so you couple yourself to a deployment platform. So like we have this innate tension between the frameworks that are willing to say like, okay, we'll just target this one thing or we'll target the few, or we're just going to opt out entirely. And, like if devs want to do that, they can figure that out themselves. With Remix kind of like trying to take this agnosticism, but be pluggable at the same time, it's kind of like, this is our opinion on this thing. So we'll see. But I think that that's so like fundamental to the DNA of what a framework is anymore. Like, I'm not convinced that, any of the other major or larger minor players will like really pivot much.
There is one weird little technical thing that is those other players like the Quick and the Svelte and the Solid are also playing in like the performance space with like the fine-grained updating, like the Ripples of the world. They're down in this like they've got the spreadsheet, all the
build a video game.
Yeah, exactly, all that kind of stuff, right? And this is not that, right? This is component level rendering. It's probably not going to compete at that level, and so it's just kind of an odd duck. I mean, at that level, you kind of have to have a compiler because in order to do the fine-grained updating, you have to have a compiler, and they don't have a compiler. So that's a twist on that. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see where it all shakes out.
I wonder because Remix was bought by Shopify, I believe, a few years back.
And what do they think about
I wonder if Shopify is going to try and either move some of their stuff into V3 or build some new kind of e-commerce platform with it, or I don't know.
The sense I get is that there's companies that do this sort of big open source effort because they're looking to use it internally. And I'd say that's kind of, there's some of that goes on, but I see this as just they like having tech luminaries on staff to help promote the brand, to help have Shopify be seen as a strong engineering team for recruiting purposes. And I see that as part of this. And then usually they don't like poo-poo the engineering efforts because if this ends up being something big, obviously they want to be proud and be a part of it. But I see it mostly as just almost like just having these people on staff and having them just very vocally be a part of their team is the main thing that they're trying to get out of this sort of effort.
I think they'll put their money on React Router 7 and hold it there.
Call it a day.
Yeah, and they've still got those guys on staff for all their production stuff that's running at ridiculous scale.
Yeah.
Well, that is actually a good segue, talking a little bit about like the companies that oversee these open source projects or are stewards of them, because React has recently announced that they have left the Meta umbrella. So to give a little background, the React ecosystem has actually taken two big steps. The first was the release of React 19.2, which brought in actually a lot of new things like primitives for an activity component. They use useEffectEvent hook, improved server streaming support. But then the other thing that caused a lot of stir and chatter was that the governance structure has changed. So React has become part of the newly formed React Foundation, which gives the project a more community and infrastructure-oriented home, separate from the former governance model where it was just part of Meta. So React is preparing to kind of move into the next era of web development as with more built-in abstractions and better performance, but also a greater community focus on maintainability and standards. What is your opinion of some of these new features like the useEffectEvent, the activity, the streaming support? Do you think that these are really going to be big draws for React users, or are they just kind of fun new features to talk about, but probably not going to get that much actual use?
I don't think there's anything earth-shattering in here, but there are some pretty decently sized features. The activity component I thought was really cool. I noticed that one right away. It's basically a component where when you hide something, so it's got this new attribute where if you set it to hidden, React will not just hide it or completely take it out of the virtual DOM. It'll actually leave it in the virtual DOM with basically the lowest possible priority. And if you've ever built any sort of system where like tabs are the perfect example, especially if you have complicated tabs and users might switch back and forth, you don't necessarily want when the user switches from one tab to the other to completely tear down the other tab. And then when they switch back, you bring it all the way back up. And this is just one simple way that you can do that in a far more performant way. And really a lot of the changes in this release or things like that, they're not earth shattering. It's not going to completely fundamentally change the front end landscape, but they're nice features, stuff that your average developer can absolutely use. And it's cool. It's cool that they're shipping things like this.
Yeah, and building on what TJ said, it's more than just like a show hide thing. It is, and they actually now with the scheduler have the ability to render, but also deprioritize and also not do like use effects and stuff like that in these kind of, alive but not alive, sections of the system. So that it's cool. It's showing off that there's a lot of features inside of the React core that we're now kind of getting access to.
Yeah, they mentioned in there that there are other modes that they are working on. So today it's just visible and hidden, but there's other ones as well. So they're kind of acknowledging there's all these different patterns that people use to build apps, and there's some potentially pretty cool things they could do with this.
So for these new things, do you have any ideas or suggestions for how teams can manage balancing whatever they have currently in their React applications while also trying to adopt or migrate to these new patterns? Like, is there anything that they need to be aware of that you would suggest really taking a good look at, or features that they should think about first?
I think if you are using like the use effect fetch pattern that we've been telling you not to do for like 100 years, to do, use query on React query instead, or SWR or whatever. If you're on that, if you're doing like that kind of async work, there's a whole new system that they have built in with kind of layering like suspense and use to go get data, and then other, let's see, there's activity. Yeah, there's activity, there's transition, there's action props. There's like a whole like layer of kind of data level stuff and also UI level stuff. And now with view transitions and all that you can get access to that really help you build out an async app the right way. So that is something you might want to think about. And it's a gradual transition. You don't need to like just go whole hog into it. You can actually like kind of parts and pieces if you want. Yeah, I would definitely take a look at that kind of work.
Yeah, I agree. If you're reading these updates, you'll know when you see something that's like, oh, this solves my problem. If you don't know, there's a few components that are like the pain points in your app, like tabs, like DJ brought up as an example. Like you'll read this and be like, oh, this is the one for me. It's easy to intuit that. So I don't know if I'd worry about being too proactive if you don't have anything right now that's really causing you or your users a lot of pain. But yeah, go read the announcements.
Just nice that React has been keeping the reverse compatibility, and it's a really good, solid framework that continues to improve, which is pretty amazing given that it's, over a decade old now. They're continuing to add cool new features and continuing to work on the core of the framework and building out their foundation.
Yeah, just for the last note on the release, that was my biggest takeaway, is that it's just cool to see that they're pushing out releases, because there was a time in React where we were stuck waiting for suspense. We were stuck waiting for releases for a very long time. And it seems like they've adopted this cadence, every 6 months or so, pushing out something and pushing out things that are actually useful for React developers. And that's just always really good to see.
Yeah, I feel like we were waiting for the compiler for a couple of years, and it went through different names, and it sounds like it was just completely rebuilt multiple times before they finally got to a place where they liked it.
It isn't necessarily bad. That's a good thing.
No, it's the fact that, like you said, they have maintained backwards compatibility even to some of the earliest versions of React, because I mean, there's still a class component in one of my React applications in
Dun, dun,
Next.js.
dun.
I
Uh-oh.
know. It's so old, but it still works. That's the best thing.
I think error boundaries, you still have to have a class component.
That's exactly what it is. It's an error boundary component.
Yeah, that is it. That's the one you need. Yeah.
Amazing. But yeah, I mean, but you're right. It seems like they've kind of found a good balance between making the new features public and developing the new features and still keeping everything else working the way it was, which is great.
And I think the foundation is them trying to move all that into the public. So we don't get those issues of suspense being changed internally in terms of how it works and freaking people out. And then them, saying, okay, we got to go and overhaul all this. Now it's all going to be built in public, which is, I think, much better. And we're going to get like real community feedback on stuff so that there's no surprises. And a lot of folks can feel like the SPA side of the house, which seems to be something that they feel like React is neglected in terms of React server components, can get its fair due. So people can contribute and say, hey, listen, the SPA side of the house needs X, Y, and Z.
So do you think that this shift to React Foundation is more about what you were just talking about, of less surprises for the community, more, I guess, maybe alignment, or just people who can weigh in on the different pieces of React and what's important to them? Or is it more about React trying to maintain its dominance in terms of being the framework that everybody chooses and the app that everyone still uses underneath to build their web application?
Well, this is the model that a lot of technologies take. There's a reason the Linux Foundation has, if you ever look at the brands under them, they have just a laundry list of different technologies that fall under their umbrella, because this is what tends to happen to technologies when they get used at a huge scale. People want a trusted resource behind them and not just an individual company. And I say this firsthand because I used to work as a competitor to React Native, worked on a framework there. And the biggest thing our marketing team did is tried to tell people, well, you can't trust Facebook with React Native because they're the sole ones in control of it. They could do anything with it they wanted any time. And the thing is, there was some truth to that. Facebook now Meta has done a good job maintaining React, I feel like, overall. But the fact that they could have done it was a thing that kept a lot of people away from using the framework, especially at bigger organizations. Big companies are very weird. They'll reject technologies for a number of different reasons. And one company having sole control of it didn't look great from that perspective.
I think that this does beg the question, like, what was Meta's motivation here? Why were they willing to kind of relinquish this control? Do you think that they were feeling that like pressure and that seemed like a data point that they needed to address? Do you think that they were like seeing people migrating to other frameworks or weren't having the buy-in? Or like, why do you think that they decided to make this move now? Because I think this has been an argument people have been making for years, right? Like, that's why a lot of these have cropped up.
I don't know if there was a specific trigger. I will say the other thing that this allows Meta to do is if they want to make the governance of React more of a distributed thing, because there are many different companies that are now getting involved with this, it puts a little more pressure on your internal resources to be. Facebook over the years now Meta has paid a lot of engineers a lot of money to run just the governance side behind the framework, beyond just the let's go in and fix bugs here and there. But they're putting a lot of effort into something that they don't really directly benefit from. I mean, they get some benefit from the open source community and whatnot, but it is a lot of work to manage an open source project at the scale of React. A lot of work. Just the number of decisions that go into, the number of planning meetings, the number of things you have to do to keep people on board. I saw this back when I was involved with jQuery, and jQuery ended up being a part of the Linux Foundation as well throughout this. There's just so much hassle and politics and stuff that I could see Meta just saying like, look, we have to move this into like an organization. We can't just be bogging down our extremely talented engineers' time getting involved with this. Let's just move this into a structure and an organization that's just equipped to handle this sort of process.
And so many companies are interested in pitching in on that, right? Microsoft pitched in big, and because it's meaningful to them. Like Microsoft uses a lot of React Native and a lot of React in their products. So why not? Why not do it? And from talking with the folks, it apparently has been in progress for 3 years, this whole changeover. So this isn't something that is just like, oh, whatever. There's a whole lot of rigmarole and legality and all that in all of this. And also React Native, canonical source of truth for the React Native library is actually still inside Meta and not open source. And so there's going to be a transition period to move that out into open source as well. And I think it's just, as TJ said, it's a lot of work. This stuff is a lot of work. And
well, especially when you have people lining up, because if you are a big company and you are heavily invested in React, it is very much worth your investment to put forth your own engineers, your own time, your own money to have a say in the future to ensure that your dependency on that is well maintained, and that you also having a voice at the table is important in those sorts of situations as well. If you don't want to see React divert in some radical way, like some other frameworks we just talked about earlier, if you want to keep it moving in a certain direction, you want to have a seat at the table, you want your voice to be a part of it, you will want to be a part of this as well. And so I think it just made sense both from Meta's perspective and from an outside perspective, a community perspective as well.
Yeah. It answers
Very
a whole
cool.
bunch of existential questions we've had about React for years. And I think it only helps that. I remember Mark Erickson putting out like a really long diatribe about, how governance wasn't right and we needed a governance system in React. And here it is.
You remember the whole
Congrats.
React license drama? And that went on for several years. I mean, it's like, at some point at Meta, you just get sick of dealing with all of this.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the call for an outside panel that kind of helps steer, I think, has been a thing that has been a constant refrain from the React community of having more input. So yeah, this finally gives them the opportunity to do that in a more organized fashion. All right, so our third topic for today, also plenty spicy, is that the tech hiring world is in a little bit of a uncomfortable position because the U.S. has seen one of the most dramatic changes to the high-skilled visa regime, the H-1B visa, in years. The Trump administration recently announced that a one-time $100,000 fee for new H-1B visa applications was going to go into effect. Typically, up until this point, it's been a few $1,000s. So it is like a 20-fold increase from what it previously was. And the policy really targets the large tech employers because they bring in so much outside talent from the US to help staff up their engineering teams. So it explicitly positions itself, the bill does, as protecting US workers, but the ripple effects are already visible. Companies are scrambling, outsourcing models are under pressure, legal challenges are mounting from the US Chamber of Commerce. So in your opinion, how is this going to reshape the calculus for companies that are hiring international engineers, especially startups versus big tech companies, do you think?
So I had to start with this one by looking up some numbers because the US government websites are actually quite good about being very open about this sort of thing. There were 400,000 H-1B applications approved in 2024. So this is a substantial number of people. That was way bigger than I would have guessed.
That is way
beforehand.
bigger, actually. Yeah.
65% of H-1B applicants are for tech roles. So this is predominant, even though it's a generic visa that you can apply to get highly skilled workers in any sector. But it's become very much associated with the tech world because we're the ones using these primarily.
So 260,000 of those.
Yeah. And so the most 70% of the recipients are coming from India. And then second is China, and then down from there. And then in terms of employers, so Amazon is the number one user of these things by a mile, by like a whole lot. And then there's an Indian contracting company that I've never heard of that's at number 2. But number 3 through 6 are Microsoft, Meta, Apple, and Google. So it's basically a who's who of the tech world that's using these to help staff their teams.
And if it's a one-time only thing, there was some confusion initially about it being annual versus being one-time only. And I don't know, the one-time only thing does change the mechanics a little bit. It might just be, these companies might just look at it as the cost of doing business.
Yeah. Well, one of the articles that I read about it to prepare for this talked about how they had clarified that, yes, it was a one-time only. It was for new H-1B visas. But one of the things that they said was because of that, the people who are already here on H-1B visas are fine for now. But in a few years' time, when we do need to bring in lots more new tech workers, new doctors, new skilled people, that's probably where we're going to start to feel the repercussions when the visas either need to be renewed or just new visas need to be applied for to bring in new labor. So that's an interesting thing, that it might not be an immediate impact, but it could be a signaling for a longer term impact, in which case maybe we're going to go towards fully remote global teams instead of US based ones. Maybe we're going to do more offshoring. I have a hard time believing that some of these companies who are based out in California are going to move to other countries in order to attract or to keep these highly skilled engineers that they have.
No, but I do think if this stands, so the other bit here that's interesting is that there's already been a lawsuit filed against the Trump administration for this. So there's a chance that this executive order won't even stand. But if it does, I don't think the Amazons of the world can just simply pay the bill here per se, because 100,000 per, that adds up very, very quickly when you start to go into the thousands. And part of the reason that these companies use these is to try to get somewhat cheaper labor by looking externally versus paying US prices. We'll see how this plays out. There's a good chance the legal system is going to come in here and mess with things. The other interesting thing of this is that, so you can look up this executive order. It's on like the whitehouse.gov website, and you can read through this. And one thing the Trump administration cites as sort of justification for doing this is that we know big tech companies are one of the biggest users of these H-1B visas. Well, they cite how all these American tech companies are laying off tons of US staff here in recent years. So Microsoft, Google, Meta all had giant layoff rounds while they continue to leverage these programs to bring in foreign workers in pretty big numbers. It's kind of interesting to see, though, that these layoffs are being used as kind of justification for a crackdown on this system. And in typical fashion with this administration, not to get too political, but there might have been something here that needed to be addressed, but changing the fees like 20 to whatever fold is like kind of a ridiculous like overreaction. Like maybe you could have started by doubling it and measuring the impact for a while versus like just going in with a sledgehammer.
And speaking of impact, there, as you say, like for the other 35% of those H-1B visas for doctors, nurses, and we have staffing shortages in those areas. We're bringing in nurses. We want nurses. Please come here and be a nurse. We're not educating them locally, so yeah, that
they don't have Amazon,
and they don't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
Hospitals certainly don't have that kind of money. So yeah, as always, unintended side effects. You're trying to target one specific area, but the thing is so broad, right, that you end up like just causing a massive pain in the butt for everybody.
And even in the tech sector, there's so many other factors here. It's like, are these layoffs happening because we're like axing the more entry-level train-up engineers because we're just prompting their work away? So like, I have a suspicion, just this is anecdotal and it's hard to get these kinds of numbers, but a lot of these like firing and hiring externally like is not the right assessment here. Like that's maybe what the optics looks like to someone, but like I still feel that we have a shortage of more senior level software people just in the industry at large. You go look at open positions, those companies are still hiring. Like they still have those job positions listed and open. Small companies do as well. So like I think that this is just going to further kind of exacerbate that problem of like domestic companies need talent they're looking for, and we're just making it more expensive for US firms to leverage like the intellect of the world. And it just seems like a misstep.
And this program has been used to bring in some ridiculously influential people. So Satya Nadella came into the US on an H-1B visa. Sundar Pichai, Elon Musk, some people you might have heard of have been brought into this company, have generated a lot of taxpayer revenue. Those three individuals and a lot of others have. So it also serves as how many people that would be extremely influential in the US never make it here because of this literal paywall, I guess, that gets put up in place.
Yeah. Do you think that this might lead to a decline in the US's competitiveness in the tech sector, that we might suffer from brain drain because those people are going to other countries like UK, Europe, places like that instead?
I think it could, but I think it'll take time to play out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being the parent of a 22-year-old, I can tell you that there's strong interest in offshore opportunities. for a number of reasons.
Well, this, in addition to the legal challenges to this sort of program, I'll also note that it is an executive order. And if recent history has told us anything, when the executive changes, a lot of these executive orders can go away also, which is something to keep in mind. I mean, Trump undid a bunch of Biden stuff the second he got in office. Biden did the same thing. US politics is cyclical. If things stay as they are, I definitely think it could hurt the US's competitiveness. But I also know that, especially in today's day and age, this stuff can change so fast that I don't think we should overreact. I would only overreact if I were actively like someone that were looking to come into the US under this policy like today. In that case, like, yes, this would be extremely influential in your life. And I just don't love the chaos of all of this. That's why I said, like, if they were going to change this program, I would prefer just a more gradual thing that is measured versus just taking an axe to it.
Harder to repeal going forward, like actually codify this stuff through the proper channels. Yeah.
Maybe get Congress involved. Maybe they could write a law.
Yeah, little things like that.
Easy.
You know,
Laws.
I just don't see a company tactically like looking at this and saying, just stay there for a little while, work remote, work with the team remote, do the job there. We'll just pay you there. And then eventually we'll see what happens with this H-1B thing. And we'll see where we'll go from there.
Yeah, because they're also H-1Bs are like 5 years, 6 years.
Oh,
something
yeah.
like that. They're pretty long.
Yeah.
So like we'll probably only get whatever, like half of the current outstanding ones will even get impacted by this if nothing changes.
Mm-hmm.
Just a big chunk of those, the applications are renewals because, they do last a handful of years.
And that kind of leads into the final question about this is what should development teams or hiring managers at companies who need these kind of skilled workers, what would your advice be to them for this current reality?
Ooh, that's tough.
It's going to depend so much on
Wait a
the
month.
company and the context. Yeah, that's tough. Hiring new people is expensive. If you have a good employee that's been there, like I have a hunch, if we've got somebody we've been paying and you're renewing it and you're coming up, I would suspect a lot of that's going to be like, we're not going to axe you and start the hiring process over because we're probably
They're invested, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's
I mean,
so
the
much
person
capital
knows,
invested in you as
your whole product line. There's experience there. And it's an incalculable thing. You can't just like plug and play, folks. That doesn't work.
That company, again, depending on the ethics and how they operate, they're also going to know that they're going to look a lot less appealing to like their competitors because they're going to have to eat this $100,000 fee if they want to do that. So like that might play into it. So like, it's still a tricky situation.
I think I'll echo this because it's hard to have advice for what hiring managers at an Amazon or a Meta and the international landscape. It's very hard to give advice for that perspective. But I'll just echo, just take care of the easy things. Take care of the people that you do have that are good. Make sure they're happy. You have to do less hiring if your good people don't leave for other places. So take care of them. Do the easy things and keep up on the news so that you're just well versed in these things. Keep listening to podcasts. You're doing good.
Keep listening to the LogRocket podcast. There you go.
Exactly. I mean, I think that that's probably the best thing because, like, as you say, we've got nothing but whiplash in the U.S. political realm right now. So if you wait a month, it'll probably change again. And then we'll talk about it then and let you know that the goalposts have moved. All right. So let's do a quick ad break and then we will go into our hot takes section. This episode is brought to you by LogRocket. It provides AI-first session replay and analytics, which surface the UX and technical issues impacting user experiences. Start understanding where your users are struggling by trying it for free at logrocket.com. All right. Jack, would you like to give us the first hot take of the panel episode?
Sure. If it can be anything, the Witcher Season 4 trailer isn't as bad as people say it is. Everybody seems to think it was like some sort of SNL skit or something like that. It looked fine to me.
I need some context here, Jack.
So Henry Cavill was originally The Witcher, and he did, I guess, 3 seasons of this thing. And he personally is a big video game fan. He makes his own PCs, all that kind of fun stuff. And he loves The Witcher. And that's why he wanted to be The Witcher. But apparently, according to him, like they weren't paying the homage to the books. I've never read the books. Maybe he's right. I don't know. And so he bailed on The Witcher. And now they've replaced The Witcher with this other guy, maybe Hemsworth. It's a Hemsworth brother. Yeah. And, the response...
Is this just unexplained? Like the actor just changes, basically, for the character?
Yes.
Okay.
I heard that it was because Henry Cavill was supposed to be Superman, so he withdrew from The Witcher in order to be Superman, and then they brought in the new guy, James Gunn, I think, over from Marvel to the DC universe, and he just like axed everybody who was in any of the DC movies. So now there's a new Superman. So Henry Cavill just like really got shafted in every direction.
Just make him 007.
Unfortunately.
Just do that. It works for me.
Consolation
Yeah,
prize.
exactly. Be
All the
007.
fanboys say he's doing Warhammer stuff. We'll see.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So, yeah, that was my hot take.
All right. TJ, do you have a hot take for us?
My hot take is that Firefox is the best browser for day-to-day web browsing. I'm a big Firefox fan. I will take that to my grave. I think that Chrome is really bloated. It's really slow. You don't realize it until you start using something else, just how long it takes to start up when you have a lot of tabs, how much memory is being seized up on your computer. Firefox runs lean. It's got a cool feature that I haven't seen other browsers do where it'll show what tab is playing audio and all you have to do is click on it. You don't have to do in Chrome now, you can like right click and do it. No, in Firefox, just one click right on the icon. You can stop any tab playing audio, click it again to start. The dev tools in Firefox are perfectly fine for 95% of the stuff you need to do. There's some advanced stuff that only Chrome can do, but you know what? You keep Chrome installed. You open it up when you reach those 5% of things that you need to do. Maybe you need to run Lighthouse or whatever. But in the meantime, you're just running so much faster than Chrome for your day-to-day usage. So it's my hot take, Firefox till the end. Also, they're keeping up on web standards way better. Like for a while, they were a little bit behind. You know, they're a smaller player. They're no Google, they're no Apple, but you know, they just ship view transition support. They're keeping up well enough. They're an important voice for the web.
Are you a big containers user? Firefox containers is like my silver bullet feature that whenever I'm trying to convince devs, I'm like, check out containers. It'll change your whole
okay.
flow.
You need to give the sales pitch.
Yeah,
so
please.
Containers are basically, they're like a creatable, deletable, copyable set of like cookies and local storage and everything that you can just elect to have open in each tab. So whenever you open a new tab, you can pick which container it goes to. So it's like isolated browsing environments. So you can have, so like for my local dev, I'm always like, I do a lot of work with like our permission system and stuff. So I'm always logged in as like 4 different users. And to do that, I can just use this like native Firefox containers feature and just like have each of these be a different person. Or if you have, you know, like certain websites, you just want to have 2 or like a clean session for that one, whatever it may be. And then you can just delete them and make new ones. And like, it's super like a first order instead of having to always open whatever incognito or.
Firefox's home screen is also really good. You just get, the little things, man. How often do you lose it? The new tab page? How many times are you looking at that new tab page? A lot. It's pretty important. It's a pretty good page.
Nice.
Okay.
That's
Does it have an AI panel? That's what I want to know.
It doesn't. Who needs it? They're all crap. You don't need an AI panel.
Yes. There you go.
Everybody
There's your spicy take right there. It's all crap.
Yeah, you don't need an AI panel. You just go to your browser, you open chatgpt.com. There you go. There's your AI panel.
They own chat.com. You don't even need to type just chat.com. Good to go.
Oh, there you go.
Boom.
Exactly. Done.
Although you can open ChatGPT in a sidebar in Firefox. So if that is your jam, great, that's there.
Okay, cool.
Nice. All right. Noel, what is your hot take for this?
I've got browser stuff too. So this development of Perplexity's deal with the Washington Post is like the timeline I do not want to be in. You guys know what I'm talking about?
No, I mean, what is this?
So right now, if you go to the Washington Post, and you know, like they usually have a paywall after some number of articles, whatever. Now you get one immediately, but if you use Perplexity's comment browser, it goes away, and they're like, "Hey, install our browser to do this thing." Guys, we're in the darkest timeline. Why? What is happening? It's awful. Comment as a browser, whatever. Like you can have your own opinions about it. And I was just defending Perplexity here in the whole Cloudflare Perplexity debacle, where I was like, we shouldn't have user agents dictating things, and like I don't want them, like the Cloudflares being the gatekeepers of the internet, depending on like the user agent that's browsing. That should be opt-in, like robots.txt. Anyway, I like things to be open, and kind of like a old school in that mentality, and that we shouldn't be dictating who can access content. And then I'm like, I had to eat my words. Like a week later, this started happening. But I can't even figure out how they do it, because of course Perplexity is like fudging their own user agents. They just look completely like normal Chrome, of course. So there's special code for sure running on the Washington Post website that then the browser also has shipped, that there's some special handshake that goes on. Like it's not just UA scanning. It's just like, guys, why? Wow. This is awful. Yeah. So I'm mad at everyone. Yeah, I
It's
don't know.
very two very random companies to strike a deal too.
Yeah, there
I
may
would
be
not-
more to it. I don't know the internals here, but it's a weird one.
If it's just another header, you're obviously going to get a Chrome extension that's just going to add the header, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So when one would think that they would have thought about that, and so I mean, is it more? Yeah, is it extra handshaking? Is it like they added a
like
little?
Is there code in the browser that's literally
Right, exactly.
like, hey, I have this domain. There's something in there.
Yeah, some extra, kind of
Yeah.
UDP packet that goes out like, hey, I'm blessed.
Well, one of the benefits of being a web developer is that we don't have to respect poorly done paywalls.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
We have all made websites that get around those, or we can just do display none.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yes,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
The inspector.
It's always a fun game. It's always a fun game to play. Did they do this paywall really well, or did they just throw some CSS up here? Let's find out.
Yeah.
Firefox reader mode right there. You click the reader mode button a lot of the time. Just like boom. Sorry.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
I got
Conversion.
Paige and TJ into AI, so they
You
make
did.
sense that now they're going to pull me into Firefox.
Yeah. Give it a shot.
All right. So my hot take, this is something that kind of came up in our Discord last week, was that I still don't like and will never use Tailwind. And I don't care how many people tell me that it's great, how many AI agents are trained on it. You better learn CSS if you're going to do front end stuff, because Tailwind is not the answer and it's never going to be. That's how I feel about it. I don't care that Next.js is like making it one of their defaults when you start a new project. I don't care that it's like bringing in more of the CSS features and it's working and it's playing well with CSS and the latest versions of Tailwind. I don't want it cluttering up my class names. I don't want to have to try and remember what is the special set of stuff that I made that is with this class name. I just don't want it. And I'm not going to use it.
Tailwind
And
needs
that's
to
the
get
hill
off
I'm willing to
Paige's
die
lawn.
on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there a specific like abstraction, or is there something in particular that really irks you that you just wish it was like inverted or some other like mechanism, or is it just the whole thing?
No, it's just the whole idea that you'll struggle along as a developer and not know how CSS works, like even in a very limited fashion. And you'll instead just put more classes and more random pieces of CSS into a single HTML element instead of just learning exactly what it is that you need or how Flexbox works or how Grid works or something.
Pure vanilla
like-
CSS. So,
Yeah. There's so many good courses for it. MDN docs are the best. People have done, it seems like every month we get a new CSS feature that's just awesome that's been released into the browsers. So gosh, just learn it already. It's so much better when you don't have to depend on this crutch of Tailwind.
But LLMs are writing all this stuff anyway. It's just a question of whether they're writing the CSS file or they're writing in the class name.
You start your prompt with "Don't use Tailwind."
Well, I mean, or if you already have an include for the CSS, it's like, oh, okay, I'll do it that way. Whatever, same difference.
That's the other thing. And I guess that's my other rant for this, is that the LLMs are terrible at writing CSS.
Well,
they always just shove a bunch of properties in there that don't need to be there. They use Flexbox and stuff when they don't need to. And I'm looking at the code because I review everything afterwards. And I'm like, I unclick a bunch of them and nothing changes. I'm like, this is so dumb. Why did you put all this extra junk in here? We don't need this.
Yeah, 8 levels of like flex call, flex in column mode. And you're like, that's the native mode.
That's the layout.
That's just the layout. That's a regular layout, dude. Just got dibs.
Well, they're only as good as their training data, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a kind of a reflection on us, I guess. But
yeah,
I'll say that for me, LLMs are pretty decent at achieving an end result in CSS. But then you always, like you said, you always have to look at how they did it, because so often I find they dump 20 properties when only 5 of them are doing anything. And then you have to just go through and like confirm. My favorite game to play with the LLMs is just like, let's remove this line and see if it was actually doing anything. Because usually you can remove a giant chunk of what the LLM did before you actually, push it up and such.
Oh, you're absolutely right. This rule isn't doing it.
Yeah. The other fun game to play with LLMs is to actually like just start a new conversation and say, hey, this junior engineer over here created this really garbage code. They didn't create it 5 minutes ago, and then have it go and fix it. Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's terrible.
What an idiot.
What an idiot.
It's more like us than we realize.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's like waking up the next morning and looking at the code. You just like, make a new chat. Like, oh my God.
That's one truism of any development, no matter any company I've worked for. The previous developer was always the worst. That's the one thing that's always true.
Everything
Their
needs to be
decisions were just
refactored.
so
Everything
bad.
needs to be changed.
Yeah.
Always.
Why would they
Exactly.
choose this?
Right.
Exactly. Oh, well, I think that is going to then wrap us up for this episode. Thank you to Jack and to TJ and to Noel for joining us. And thank you to everybody who listened. We will see you on the next episode of the LogRocket podcast.
Thanks, Paige.
Bye, everybody.